to my show. One of the things that has concerned me for quite some time is the fact that Murdoch Press seems to govern some aspects of the airwaves which are often unhelpful to those of us who sit on the other side of politics. I've been very critical over the past, however long I've been doing this really, about the way by which they represent themselves, how their after dark commentators in particular express extreme biases towards the right wing of politics, and ashamedly they call out the left wing for what they determine to be opinions that are different or separate from their own. So they don't offer any balance, and it just reminds me often of Sky News or Fox News actually in the US, where they claimed on a daily basis that they were fair and balanced. I'm not going to criticise their news content and the news that's held before 6 p.m, but I certainly will complain about some of their commentators after dark, primarily because they do express biases and they don't understand what those biases are, but they're happy to criticise everybody else for theirs. And one of the things that interests me the most, I think, is that they have people on the station who clearly have different views to the rest of us, or those people that might sit in a moderate section of the political spectrum, or those people that sit on the extreme left. However, what happens? The question is, what happens when those views are expressed and you may not necessarily agree with them? Now, a good news network would push back immediately when someone presents something that is simply not factual or may appear to be slightly racial, for that matter, even though your views generally tend to have a racist overtone, and you're pushing back particularly against the Yes campaign in regard to the constitutional reform. But what do you do when someone says something that you think they shouldn't? Let's have a look and see how Rita deals with this. And I'll run through the video with you, might stop it along the way as she says some rather outlandish things. But this is a product of Murdoch Press. This is an effort to be able to sway the population to think like they do. Now, they will argue that the ABC, which is fundamentally your and my network, because we happen to pay through it through our taxes, are trying to do the same thing. And there's this argument which comes out in relation to balance. And I don't know whether I've got the video here, but particularly, what is it? What is balanced media? Well, I think balanced media is to be able to have a reasonable debate about any particular topic and to have both sides being presented in a calm, steady, methodical way. Now, frankly, Sky News never do that. Never, from what I can see. They have the particularly right-wingers on their program. We're about to see one of them, and they present a particular view. But there are times when sometimes even those views are seen as inappropriate. So let's just see, we'll run through this, and let's just see how Rita specifically responds to this particular guy. And I'll just reset this at the beginning, and here we go.
Let's jump into today's big news with senior columnist for The Australian, Nick Cater. Nick, this week the lower house passed the bill for the Indigenous voice to Parliament, and the Yes advocates have turned up the hysteria to full blast. Have a listen to Marcus Stewart on the project with this argument.
On the back of a no vote, I think it doesn't look good in the international community, that's for sure.
Do you think Australians respond to that? Like the world won't like us, they will think that we're a bit strange or that we're backward or something like that?
Nick, this is straight out of the Remainer campaign. They also pushed all the...
I like the way she got Remainer campaign right. He corrects her in a moment, which just goes to show how well-informed Rita actually is. She's really not very bright, let's be fair.
These notions that Brexit would see Great Britain become a pariah state, would see investment in the UK plummet and all sorts of other scaremongering. Do you think it will work here?
I don't think so, Rita. The Ramonas, I think you mispronounced it as Remainers. It was Ramonas.
Of course, yeah.
But look, this is what they always pull this, don't they? You know, it's going to look bad in the eyes of the international community. Who do they mean by the international community? What they actually mean is the eyes of people who read.
I think what they mean is actually the international community. Let's face it, those people with whom we trade, those people with whom we have diplomatic relationships, those people with whom we may wish to negotiate with regard to Julian Assange being returned back to this country. Those people are people we do business with at all levels, and the last thing in the world we want to be seen by them is as a racist country that prohibits our Indigenous people from having the rights they deserve or to be recognised in the way that they need to be recognised. So, yeah, I think that it does. I don't think it's a big deal, but I do think that it is an argument worth discussing, and that we do want to be seen in the best possible light. We want to be seen, actually, as a progressive nation, someone who takes on progressive policies, who looks after the populace in appropriate ways, that doesn't denigrate or put down people. Not at all like, I'd hate to think that at some level the version of Sky News could become our political agenda, because that would be catastrophic. So yes, I think this is an argument worth having, a discussion worth having, and I'm glad it was raised because it needs to be discussed. But does it need to be discussed in the same way that Rita chooses to discuss it here with this character?
The New York Times and The Guardian. And I tell you what, there's lots of things Americans look bad in the eyes of the world about, like, electing Bart Simpson's grandpa as president, but we don't keep going on about it. It's their affair.
And I think that comment in itself is offensive. So how are you forwarding the argument by that sort of reference to Biden? I don't understand that, but there again, it does display your distinct bias.
Yeah, it's their constitutional affair. This is our affair. And if we start making decisions on what we imagine the eyes of the world are going to think of it, then we won't be concentrating on the real essential issues, which is changing our constitution that will change the way we're governed forever.
And I love this notion that somehow changing the constitution, and simply by recognising Indigenous people as being the rightful people, I was going to say owners, which is another issue, but I do tend to agree with that notion, but the rightful inhabitants of this land from the very beginning is more than appropriate. And at the moment, that's all it's intended to do. But these people here seem to think that for some particular reason, having Indigenous people incorporated in the Constitution is going to enable them to be entitled to a whole lot of things that they think, as white people, are going to be taken from them. And how wrong can they be? You're
absolutely right. What they're talking about is what our like-minded lefty mates will think in London and New York, not what the international community will think. Now, this left-wing powerhouse that was Get Up, well, there seemed to be in all sorts of trouble. No annual report published online since 2021, and more recent financials showing a dramatic $2.1 million loss, with rumours of mass redundancy.
Now, this is quite exciting for Sky News, because Get Up have been a pain in the arse to anyone on the right forever, ever since they've been around. And so this is where Sky News really pisses me off, because here they are salivating around the fact that Get Up has not got the reach that it once had. Now, it doesn't mean it's going out of business. It doesn't mean that it's irrelevant anymore, because it isn't. But here they are salivating. But I must confess, to be honest, if Sky News and Murdoch Press went out of business tomorrow, I guess I would salivate too, because they represent the worst in media, and they represent people like Rita and Bolt and others who are just simply the worst possible people that you could ever have, trying to express the worst possible ideas designed to divide us and to make us think that everybody apart from them is at fault. So yes, so I think that it's sad that clearly they're going through those difficulties, but nevertheless, Get Up will survive.
Is, Nick, the Sydney Morning Herald's reporting at the last election, many of Get Up's donors switched to Climate 200 till independence. So I've got to ask, did Simon Holmes...
I don't know why she has to do that. I don't know why she has to. They are Teal Independents. It's not a political party. It certainly was financed by Holmes Accord, but it is not. It is not a political party, even though a group of them were financed by the same people. So I don't know why she does that.
Accord helped kill the Liberal moderates and Get Up. I mean, this man is a Conservative hero.
Oh, yeah. I mean, whatever happened, the donors obviously got up and went. So, but I don't think the organisation's not dead, Rita. I'm actually on their mailing list. I get emails from them every now and then.
My guess is that'll be one person taken off their mailing list from this point on.
And one of the recent ones, always asking for money, of course. They always ask me to chip in $12.
It is an idiot. The reason why anybody who's into donations knows that $12 is an amount that psychologically people can accept, as opposed to $20, as opposed to $5. You know, any jerk who understands how this process works would understand that. But clearly he doesn't.
I don't know why they ask for $12, but they always do. The last one, they were getting head up about the fact it was an absolute scandal, apparently, that your colleague Peter Credland had shown the No campaign video for 10 minutes. And on the basis of this, they were asking their donors to chip in so that they could get their own production team working on their own video. I haven't seen it, by the way, so probably that.
And just on that, how much airtime did the No campaign get? Because this is one of the other arguments they make, is that the Yes campaign has X amount of money and it's funded by the government. Well, actually, I don't know how that money's divided, but there is money for both sides. But they, that is Murdoch Press, are funding the No campaign with as much money as they can pour in. So the point that Get Up were making was that if they, that is Murdoch, can fund this for that amount of time, then we need to put up an ad that counters that for the same amount of time. And they're right. Firstly, the fact that Murdoch is supporting the No campaign tells us a lot about where he stands in terms of his version of race and where he thinks Indigenous people should be in this society or whatever. And also the people that work for him, where do they stand in relation to this? Well, if they're going to work for him, they're going to receive that money. And Peter Credland in particular is going to play on her show a 10-minute video, which is a No campaign video. Then there needs to be a response, right? Now, I don't know whether for sure the Yes campaign have put out a similar sort of response to that. I can't comment on that. I haven't seen it, haven't heard about it or whatever, but then maybe that's because I don't watch free-to-air TV. But nevertheless, she put out a 10-minute video around the No campaign. Now, there needs to be some form of countering that, and certainly Get Up decided that they were the ones who were going to do it.
Donation campaign wasn't too flash either.
Yes, that's what the Yes campaign is lacking, is funding. I mean, it doesn't just have pretty much all the government funding, every corporate, every big bank, every sporting body. Give me a break. Now, Liberal MP Bev MacArthur has been criticised heavily for claiming Indigenous Australians should be thankful for the wonderful things that have been enabled by colonisation. The profoundly hopeless John...
I just want to say that this part of the conversation is revolting. To think that people still think like this, that old friggin' farts like this dickhead think like this, is appalling. Now, he's from the Menzies Institute, so they're still sitting back with the Menzies thought patterns back in the 50s and the 60s, they haven't moved on from there. So just keep that in mind as this dude craps on about the way he views this problem, because this part of this conversation is horrific. And this man needs to be called out for what he is, which is a narrow-minded bigot, because that is who he is. So I'll just play this bit for you, and you can make up your own mind and put your comments down below.
The profoundly hopeless John Prosciutto, the Liberal leader here, said her comments were hurtful.
I do love the way they have a go at the Liberal leader, though. You know, and why not? Because clearly he holds views that you may not. I just love it when they just keep shooting themselves in the foot.
But if you look at the entirety of her comments, Nick, I fail to see how what she said is in any way inaccurate. And she was responding to the news that the city of Greater Geelong had cancelled Australia Day celebrations. What do you make of this entire furor?
I'm not going to comment too much about this at this point until you hear what this clown has to say.
I don't see why it should be controversial, but maybe they think, maybe they've been reading too much Bruce Pascoe and they think that we should be thanking the Aboriginal people for inventing Wi-Fi and the hills hoist.
Oh yeah, let's laugh at that, Rita. You're such a jerk. Let's laugh at that.
And all the rest of it. But I mean, this is, the facts of the matter are clear. I mean, anthropologists of the 19th century wrote about the conditions of Aboriginal people back then. We know that their life expectancy was very low. We know that it was a pretty brutish life as a hunter-gatherer. It wasn't my cup of tea. I mean,
oh, Jesus.
I mean, obviously there are lots. Everybody's proud of their culture, and they're welcome to maintain that. But I'm sure that every Aboriginal person you possibly met would be thankful for modern dentistry, for instance, and as we all are. So I think that you had an isolated society. It was connected with the modern world. It was able to get the benefits that have come from that modern world. There may be other things that some Aboriginal people don't like, but I'm sure they won't be giving away their flat-screen TVs anytime soon.
You're a fucking moron, mate.
Well, there's been a lot of good, but there's was all.
This is where she tries to cover. This is what I was saying earlier on. So this is where Rita realises he overstepped the mark, even for her. And so she tries to cover for him right now.
Also plenty of harm. No one is denying that. Later in the show, I'll be speaking to Douglas Murray about this myth that pre-settlement Australia, America, Canada, really anywhere, was some sort of peaceful, prosperous utopia. It was anything but we've got to be straight about the facts. Now, let's switch to...
Right, got to be straight about the facts. Okay, good on you, Rita, for being straight about the facts. Because this sort of thinking that this dude has about how we should view Indigenous people as a group of people who are devalued in our society, who therefore should, and who have horrific circumstances, high incarceration rates, more kids removed than anybody else per head population, and so on. There's health issues, low mortality rate, all that stuff, right? We know it, we see it, we hear about it all the time. All these people somehow should be grateful for their flat TV screens, or the fact that they can get dentists. In some parts of remote Australia, they can't get medical treatment. What do you know, you jerk, about anything that's happening for these Indigenous people? Sure, anthropologists for years have been writing about the conditions in which they live, but we as white people have done nothing or very little in order to rectify them, which comes out from the Closing the Gap report and a whole host of other reports that have been written about Indigenous people over the last 30, 40 years. You white prick, why do you mention this narrow-minded 1940s, 50s view about Indigenous people? I think it's atrocious. I think this is, and that Rita, to her credit though, endeavoured to correct some of what he was saying, but simply could have said to him, you are wrong. You should never say those sorts of things about Indigenous people. You should never, that thing is wrong. So never, I say to Sky News, not that they would ever listen to me, I hasten to add, but I say, don't ever have this man back on. Never. his attitude, his beliefs are so outdated. And that's the problem. The problem is that those people propagate those sorts of beliefs and get others to believe the sorts of things that he says. And they are just wrong. So if you are... So look, if you've got a comment, please put it down below. This stuff frustrates the daylights out of me, which is quite obvious. Put it down below and subscribe to my channel. And if you wish to contact me, you can do so at this particular email address. So thanks for being with me, everybody. Look, take care of yourselves. Look after yourselves. Look after others. And more importantly, be safe.